There's a moment you've lived 1,000 times, but never talked about. You're sitting in your room. Maybe the lights are off. Maybe you're scrolling, aimlessly, trying to fill the silence. And there's this quiet ache behind your ribs. Not pain, not exactly. More like the feeling that something should have happened by now. Someone should have seen. Someone should have come. But no one did. And the worst part? You didn't even scream. You just kept going. You became good at pretending. You smiled in the places that demanded smiles. You performed your life like a role you were handed, without rehearsal, without choice, hoping that if you did it well enough, someone would finally notice the weight you carry in silence. We've all been there, trained to believe that help is coming, that maybe, if you wait just a little longer, someone will walk into your life and rescue you from your own mind, from the chaos, the doubt, the tiredness that doesn't go away with sleep. But what if that's the lie that keeps you trapped? What if the waiting is the cage? Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. No one is coming to save you. And that might be the most liberating truth you'll ever hear. Because if no one's coming, you can stop waiting. You can stop rehearsing a version of you that might finally be loved. You can return to yourself, not the self that pleases, not the self that hides pain behind productivity, the self that's raw, real, present. And maybe in this silence, the same silence you once feared, you'll hear something you've never heard before. Your own voice, tired, but still breathing, hurting, but still here. And what if, just what if, that's enough to begin again? You don't remember exactly when it started, the waiting, but at some point, you began shrinking parts of yourself. You softened your voice. You laughed when it wasn't funny. You held back tears, not because they weren't real, but because they weren't convenient. Somewhere along the line, you made a silent agreement with the world. I'll be who you need me to be. Just please, don't leave. And so you learned the art of survival. Not in war zones or on city streets, but in classrooms, in bedrooms, in board meetings. You survived in plain sight, by blending in, by becoming agreeable, by disappearing without ever leaving. That's the tragedy no one sees. How many of us are alive, but not living, just echoing what we think others want to hear, walking through days like actors in a play we didn't audition for. We become fluent in a language that betrays us. I'm fine. It's not a big deal. I'm just tired. But deep down, we're not tired. We're hollow. Not okay, not really. We're just scared that if we showed the full truth of who we are, no one would stay. And so we wait. For the text that never comes, for the apology we'll never hear, for the version of ourselves that finally feels worthy. We wait like someone's about to open the door and say, I see you. You don't have to fight alone anymore. But no one comes. And still, we keep performing. Because somewhere, buried beneath all that pretending, we believe that love is earned through sacrifice. That if we just hurt quietly enough, someone will reward us with belonging. But what if that's the lie? What if love isn't a transaction? What if being seen doesn't require being perfect? What if the person you've been waiting for is the one hiding behind all these masks? Because the truth is, self-abandonment is the first cost of trying to be loved by others. And the longer you wear the mask, the more you forget what your own face looks like. We think we need to be saved, but sometimes we just need to stop hiding. What if the problem was never that no one chose you? What if the real wound is that you stopped choosing yourself? And it's not your fault. You were taught to please. You were taught to be nice, to be good, to not take up too much space. You were taught that your feelings were too much, your needs inconvenient, your voice too loud. But you were never too much. You were just too real for a world that celebrates masks over authenticity. And here's the wild part. You can leave this silent theater anytime. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. You just need to remember, you were never born to perform. You were born to live. The moment you stop trying to be saved, you become something else entirely. Not a victim, not a project, but a presence. A person who knows that freedom doesn't arrive from outside. It awakens from within. And it begins, always, with one quiet decision. I'm done abandoning myself to be loved. Because once you stop waiting, you start returning to your voice, your truth, your rhythm. And suddenly, the world feels less like a stage and more like a path. One you were always meant to walk, barefoot, unpolished, and finally, fully yourself. Drop a comment like you're not trying to sound okay. Write the words you've been rehearsing in your head for years. What were you waiting for? And what did it cost you to keep waiting? There are wounds that scream, and wounds that whisper. The loud ones, people notice. The visible ones get sympathy, validation, care. But the quiet wounds, the ones that live in your habits, your silence, your self-doubt, those are the ones that shape you in secret. No one saw when you stopped trusting. No one noticed when you started shrinking your dreams to fit inside someone else's comfort. And no one ever told you that this too is a form of pain. To live every day a little less than who you are, just to feel safe. But it is pain, the kind that doesn't bleed, the kind that wakes you up at 3 a.m. with a knot in your chest and no name for it. The kind that makes you overthink a simple message for hours because somewhere long ago you learned that being yourself was risky. This is the pain that molds you, silently, like water on stone. Little by little, you start to become someone else. Not because you want to, but because it feels like survival. You trade authenticity for acceptance. You trade freedom for predictability. And somewhere in between, you lose your reflection. In Buddhist thought, suffering, dukkha, is not just about pain. It's about disconnection from life, from the present moment, and most heartbreakingly, from yourself. So when you ask, why do I feel numb even when everything seems fine? It's because part of you is still frozen in that moment. That moment you decided it was safer to hide than to be rejected again. We carry these moments like shadows. The day you weren't chosen, the time you opened up and were met with silence, the love that made you feel small instead of seen. And each of these moments whispered the same lie. You're too much. You're not enough. You don't matter unless you're useful. But here's the truth. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were always just real. And reality as it is, unfiltered, emotional, raw, is terrifying in a world built on illusions. So we hide. We become high-functioning ghosts. We smile. We achieve. We help everyone else. But who holds you when you collapse in the quiet? Pain, when ignored, becomes identity. But pain, when seen, becomes a door. And that's the shift. To stop seeing your scars as signs of failure and start seeing them as symbols of survival. You're still here. That means something. It means your heart refused to fully close, even when the world gave it every reason to. And maybe pain isn't something to escape. Maybe pain is the language your soul uses when it's trying to come home. There's a Buddhist image, not in books, but in spirit, that life is like a lotus in muddy water. It doesn't bloom despite the mud. It blooms because of it. Your suffering is not a detour. It's the soil of awakening. Every ache, every rejection, every quiet night you thought you wouldn't survive, they're all part of your becoming. And what if the goal isn't to feel better? What if the goal is to feel fully, to stop numbing, to stop pretending, to finally sit with the truth of what's hurt you, not to fix it, but to honor it? Because maybe that pain isn't asking for a solution. Maybe it's asking for your presence, your honesty, your love. You've never been broken, just buried. Beneath the roles, the masks, the fear, there's still a pulse, a truth, a self that remembers how to breathe without permission. And you don't have to become her overnight. You don't have to fix everything by tomorrow. You just have to stop abandoning yourself in moments of discomfort. You just have to pause when the ache rises and say, I see you. I'm here. We're not running this time. That is how healing begins. Letting go. It sounds like surrender, like loss, like giving up. But maybe we've misunderstood what it truly means to let go. Because letting go isn't about walking away from what you love. It's about no longer holding yourself hostage to who you had to be in order to be loved. There's a version of you that was built on tension, on clenched fists, on walking on eggshells, on holding your breath just to keep the peace. And maybe that version kept you safe. Maybe it got you through. But it also kept you small. It taught you to filter your truth, to perform joy, to apologize for your presence. That version of you is tired, not weak, tired. Tired of proving, tired of pleasing, tired of being a mirror for everyone else's comfort. Letting go means honoring that tiredness. It means releasing the belief that you owe the world a watered-down version of your soul. It means no longer negotiating your worth in relationships, in workspaces, in the mirror. Imagine this. You're standing in a crowded room. Everyone's wearing a mask, smiling wide, laughing loud, and then you take yours off, not out of rebellion, not for attention, just because you're done hiding. That's what real detachment looks like. It's not cold, it's warm, steady, and quiet. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to be loud, because it's no longer afraid of being alone. You start to detach not from people, but from the version of yourself you had to become to be accepted by them. You stop chasing closure. You stop begging for clarity from people who couldn't handle your depth. You begin to walk away from things not with bitterness, but with peace. Because finally, you're walking with yourself. And there's something breathtaking about that moment. That first breath you take after releasing the need to be understood. You don't float above your life. You drop into it. Deeper, truer, freer. Like cutting strings you didn't know were tied to your ribs. Like stepping off a stage and remembering how it feels to walk barefoot in the grass. This is the paradox. The less you try to be loved, the more lovable you become. Because you're no longer performing. You're no longer shape-shifting to fit in. You're no longer exhausting yourself trying to be enough for a world that doesn't even know what that means. Letting go is not losing. It's choosing. It's choosing to trust that who you are, in your rawest form, is not only enough, but sacred. And yes, people might leave. Things might fall apart. But in that space, something else emerges. You, the real you, the one who isn't addicted to being needed, the one who doesn't shrink when things get quiet, the one who understands that peace isn't found in control, but in flow. And that's the Buddhist truth hiding beneath the silence. Attachment is suffering, not because we care too much, but because we try to control what cannot be controlled. We grasp, we cling, we fear loss more than we welcome freedom. But the moment you release the illusion of control, you begin to dance with life instead of wrestling it. You feel the fear and move anyway.
You hear the old thoughts, you'll be alone, you'll regret this, and you thank them for trying to protect you, but you don't let them drive. Letting go is not passive. It's the most active choice you can make. To stop gripping the edge of a life that's too small. To stop waiting for permission to be whole. So you breathe. You exhale the need to be rescued. You inhale the truth. You've always been the one you were waiting for. And with each breath, you remember, you are not behind.
You're not broken. You are simply becoming. And then comes the quiet. Not the silence of isolation, but the silence after a storm. When the winds stop. When the masks fall. When there's no one left to impress. Not even yourself. At first, it feels like emptiness. The space that opens up when you stop clinging, stop begging, stop performing. It feels almost like loss. But sit in it long enough, and you begin to notice something else. The stillness isn't empty. It's sacred. It's the sound of your soul, undistorted by noise. It's the quiet whisper that says, you're safe now. You can come home. This is what surrender feels like. Not giving up, but giving in. Not to despair, but to reality. To life as it is, not as you wished it would be. And in that surrender, there's no dramatic breakthrough. No spotlight, no applause, just presence. You wake up one morning and realize you're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not trying to earn your place. You're not holding your breath through life. You're here. And that quiet landing is the moment the healing begins to root. There's a Buddhist softness in this kind of awakening, because it's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You return to your body, to your breath, to the things that don't need to be loud to be real. A warm cup of tea, the sun through the curtains, the sound of your heartbeat. You begin to live from presence instead of performance. You stop needing to explain your boundaries. You stop over-apologizing for your emotions. You stop demanding clarity from people who live in chaos. You just live. Not in rebellion, not in defense, but in peace. Because you finally learned the most important truth. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be felt. You were never broken, just buried under expectations that were never yours to carry. Now, you walk lighter. Not because life got easier, but because you stopped dragging stories that weren't true. You stopped rehearsing conversations that were never going to happen. You stopped waiting for closure from people who couldn't even offer presence. You stopped making your healing dependent on anyone else's understanding. This is the silence that heals. Because in this silence, you remember, you don't need to be saved. You just need to be met, fully, gently, and without judgment, by yourself. You sit in the stillness, and it doesn't scare you anymore. You realize the solitude you once feared is the same solitude that now feels like home. And that's the freedom they never told you about. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of return to your own rhythm, to your own truth, to the quiet resilience that's lived in your bones all along. So maybe the best thing that ever happened was that no one came, because it gave you a chance to. And maybe this isn't the end of the story. Maybe this is where it finally begins. Not with a scream, but with a breath. Not with answers, but with acceptance. And if you're still holding on to a version of yourself that no longer fits, to a dream that hurts more than it heals, to a person who only loves the version of you that hides, then maybe today is the day you pause. Not to run, not to fight, just to listen. And ask yourself, what if the thing I've been searching for has been quietly waiting in the parts of me I keep trying to silence? What if your rescue was never coming because you were never lost? You were only waiting for someone to stay, and finally, you did.